Welcome back, my friends. Today we're out here on the range all by ourselves, not a cloud in the sky, except maybe those. But anyways, nobody else here but us. A nice calm day, and we're going to be testing some 450 Bushmaster. We're just getting set up here. I'm going to run out and hang our target up at 50 yards. We're not exactly shooting for groups or anything. This is merely a function test and to get some chronograph data along with it. So what are we going to be testing today? Well, we've got the 250 grain FTX. We're using the approximate factory load of Lil Gun powder. Yeah, I finally broke down and got some Lil Gun. Some of that Lil Gun, y'all. Anyway, sorry, I just really hate saying the name because it's kind of silly. But moving along, we also have a 340 grain Lee sized down to 452. And we're going to be testing a ladder charge of these with 5 different charges of accurate 1680. And then here in the middle, we have a 410 grain 457, also sized down to 452. We're testing 2 charges of 1680 and 2 charges of CFE Black. But let's get started with this 250 grain FTX and see if it'll function the gun. And our gun today, we've got an Aero Precision lower with our 450 Bushmaster 18-inch upper. It is a side charging unit. We've got a cheap Caldwell bipod up front. We're using a Vortex Diamondback 4-16 with an Aero Precision ultralight mount on there. So let's get to it with this first test here with the FTX and Lil Gun. Function testing 250 grain FTX with 38.3 grains of Lil Gun. This first round we'll just see if it'll lock back on open and what velocity we get. Hot damn!
2261.
2261. Let's see if we can find that brass. So our first shot was 2261. I thought it locked back, but it's in this same position right here. I'm going to load up 2 on the magazine and see if it'll feed both of them or if it'll get stuck here and not go forward all the way. All right, we're going to shoot 2 more and see if it'll feed both of them. I think it cycled. Holy moly, guys.
$2,273.
Alrighty. Seems like it is locking back. Not all the way, but still on that part of the magazine. Right there. And I can drop this, so I guess that's what they consider locked back. Let me find the brass and we'll check that out. Alright, so aside from the marker around the primers, they're pretty much rounded still, and we're not seeing any sort of pressure on our brass here. So I've got 2 more shots with this charge, and we've got a pretty good group going on down there. So I'm going to shoot these last 2, and then we'll check out our velocities and go check out the group. Okay. Final 2 shots here in this group at 50 yards. Mainly just function testing. Here we go.
$2,229.
And a jammer. All right. Okay then.
$2,240.
Okay, so overall not a total failure. We were able to feed a couple rounds consecutively, and I think that last failure to feed we had is because it was the last round. I think I've had that issue with this gun before, but it seems like our pressure signs, we do not have any. Look how rounded our primers are. Wow. Also the case heads, no excessive ejector marks or any of that fun stuff. Moving on to velocity, our first shot with the cold bore, 2261. Our high was 2273 there with the low of 2209. We got an average 2242, extreme spread of 64, and standard deviation of 23. And I'm pretty sure my gun with the factory loaded 250 grain FTX shot right at 2140. So this is running about 100 feet per second faster than the factory loading. But it could also be a little warmer today than when I had previously tested the factory ammo. So that could be a different variable in there as well. Anyways, this one wasn't a total loss. Perhaps I need to actually get a magazine labeled 450 Bushmaster rather than slapping in a different follower in my standard GI mag. All the way up here at the 50-yard line, here's our group. You know, that's probably 1.5 inches or maybe 3 MOA. Out at 100, you know, that's going to be 3 inches or so. Our height is probably right on where we want to be 0'd at 100 for a point of impact and point of aim hit right there. So this is probably accurate for 50 yards. However, our powder charge and our accuracy is not quite dialed in. But also note, we were here for function testing. So anyways, next up are the 340 grain cast Lee bullets. Okay, so we're now testing 34 through 38 grains of accurate 1680 here at 50 yards again. And this is the Lee 457 340, roughly 350 grains with my alloy. And again, size 2.452. I'm going to have them all loaded in the magazine to see if it'll function and feed, and then see if that last round is just a magazine issue or what we can do from there. So stay tuned, let's get to it. 350 grain cast bullet 1680 test.
$1,680.
Okay, we ejected. Did we feed the next? No, we did not. All right, 35 grains.
$1,641.
And we successfully cycled 35 grains. Let's check out our brass real quick. Same thing there at 35 grains, no pressure, but we did cycle. So let's try 36.
$1,739.
Perfect, we had cycling again at 36. Let's check out our brass. All right, we fed and functioned perfectly with 36 grains. Let's move it up to 37 and see what we can do here.
$1,777.
Woo doggy. So 37 grains there was perfect. We hit a velocity of 1777. No pressure signs. Ejection right at 4 o'clock. And our group here is actually tightening up together. So let's try our last shot and see if it'll lock back or if we're getting this last round feeding issue because of our magazine. So let's go to our last charge, 38 grains. It did feed. And that is our last round, so let's see if it locks back on empty. That's hot. Okay, so that was freaking hilarious. Here was our 38 grain charge, obviously rounded primer, no pressure signs. It ejected perfectly and demolished my other camera. So we had perfect ejection once again. Our velocity got up to 1779, but it seemed like 1 grain lower we had the same function at 1777 with a whole grain difference there. So maybe this top end charge here is where we need to be. Let's go check out our group and see how that looks. Back up at the target. This was our first shot with the cast 350 grain, 1680 velocity. It was way off high and to the right for some reason, but then our last 4 charges, they're all kind of stacked right in here. And now we have a couple charges to work with on the 410 grain. All right, folks, on to our last group here. We're going to be trying some 1680 and some CFE Black with a 412 grain cast Lee bullet. And you can see we have a pretty hefty crimp on there. I've been doing some reading, and that seems to be integral to both function, accuracy, etc. in this cartridge. So, of course, make sure you're still within the headspace spec because it is head spacing off of your case mouth. But you do need a nice generous crimp on there to allow that pressure to fully build up to its potential inside of your barrel before leaving and blowing all that powder out of the barrel. So anyways, I've got 2 charges here to test with 1680 and 2 charges with the CFE Black. And this data was gathered from the new Hornady release of their Sub-X reloading data because these bullets were within about 10 grains of that. So I picked somewhere in the middle, and we're going to test those real quick. Alrighty, 1680, 34.5 grains. Fly in the mouth. Repeat. Fly in the mouth.
1640.
Whoop doggy. We ejected. And we fed the last round, I believe. Yep, came off the magazine. Let's check out the brass. Ejection was right at 2:30, 3 o'clock. Velocity 1640 and no pressure signs. Let's try our 35 grain charge. And it's in the chamber, hot and ready to go because it fed off our magazine like expected. Hooray!
$1,647.
God damn. That sun gun kicks you there, boy. 1647 velocity. Let's check out our brass. All right, our 2 pieces of brass, 34.5 grains, no pressure on the case head. Same here at 35 grains. Almost an identical velocity, 1640 and 1647. We had full function. It freaking kicks you there, boy, I tell you what. Anyways, we're on to our charges of CFE Black. Let's check those out after we run down and see where these actually hit on the paper real quick. All right, beautiful. Here we have our first 2 shots with the 1680. I'm not sure which one was which. I'm just guessing. This is our lower charge, that's our higher charge. But they're just about damn near touching each other. A little bit right, but of course, if that was our load, we could 0 to it. But good to know we're on paper. We have nice round holes. We're functioning. Let's try our CFE Black. I'm going to mark these here in case the others overlap. We'll know which ones came from which powder. All right, guys, you guys know the drill. We're on our very last test here. You put your higher charge on the bottom, your lower charge above that one, so they feed in order and you don't start at your higher charge. Ha! Here we go. We're going to be testing our last loads here. CFE Black, 34.5 and 35 grains at 50 yards with the 412 grain cast lead. All right, folks, CFE Black. Lee 457 405 at 412 grains, 50 yards here. Let's see if we can get her on the paper.
$1,624.
Okay, we ejected that piece of brass right at 4 o'clock where you want her. I'm going to go check it out, and then we'll see if we can fire this next round. And just as we expect, no pressure signs, but we were about 150 feet per second lower on velocity. But let's try our next charge and see what it'll give us here. 35 grains of CFE Black.
1,579.
So we had an interesting drop in velocity on the last shot. and I think it hit far right off of the paper. Let's go up there and have a look. And there's no cratering or anything on our primers, so absolutely no pressure signs. Brass still looks good, but we had an interesting drop in velocity. And what were the velocity numbers? We had 1624 on our first charge, and then we moved up a half a grain and lost a considerable amount of velocity there. Fully functioned. It fed the round off the magazine, and our last round actually locked back. Let's go check out our target and figure out if we can find that last round. Alrighty, fellers, here we are back again. This was our first shot with the CFE Black. It was on the paper, so I was like, all right, cool, we'll go to our next one. But then our second shot landed here off the page, another inch away from that first shot. So it seems like, while CFE Black did function very well, we are not having the best luck of accuracy. While our 1680 had our two different charges almost touching there, and much closer to our point of aim than up here and over here. So it's good to note that CFE Black functioned, but I'll probably move forward with the 1680 as we will over here, because this looks promising from 4 different shots, almost all touching together. And our 250 grain FTX looks almost promising if we work on that a bit as well. Okay, so we're back here at the Dummy Round Compound Ballistics Research Facility with our results from this afternoon. We'll get it started off with the 250 grain FTX. This is my cute little dummy round. It's just Hornady brass. That's what everything was today, was Hornady brass. We used CCI 450 primers, and this was 38.3 grains of little gun. So here is those 5 shots at 50 yards. Not that great at all compared to the factory ammo with this projectile that we've seen. But at least we were able to check function, and we got good results with that. So that's good to know. And it did seem like our last round feeding seemed to be a common issue. I'm sure that's just the magazine or something like that, because it happened with several of the loads today, not just this one on the last round specifically. So I don't think there's actually any feeding issues if I have enough power in that load, but sometimes that last round would get hung up for one reason or another. Hard telling at this point, but I'm glad I was able to get function and feed consecutive rounds in a row off the magazine. So our velocity for little gun, average of 2242, extreme spread of 64, and a standard deviation of 23. That's also not great, but we were hotter than the factory ammo by about 100 feet per second. I remember that was getting around 2150, and here we're at 2242. So we were able to get a little more velocity, but that could have also been the cause of our group opening up, or me just being a big pansy and scared of the recoil because I haven't shot this gun in a minute. So I wasn't quite acclimated at this point in the day, and you know, excuses and such. Anyways, I was after function today, not group size, so good news, yay. And here's a quick look at our brass for the little gun charges here with the circle around the primers. You can see they're barely flattened, yet still rounded around the edges, and we don't have any big ejector marks or anything like that, only where the bolt smashes into it while loading in the next round. But that's pretty common. But no pressure signs as far as that stuff goes, so nothing with the little gun brass. Our second bullet here is the Lee 457 340 round flat, and with my alloy these are about 350. We were testing 1680, and I was going from 34 up to 38 grains. All of them had a rounded primer. We never saw any pressure signs, and our first couple charges were both in the 1680 and 1640 range, and those had failure to feed and failure to eject and all that. But then our next 3 charges, 36, 37, 38, were all above 1700 and actually pretty close together here, and they ejected and fed perfectly, and they ejected right at about 4 o'clock where you want them, and we had lockback. So obviously these charges near the top end were able to generate enough gas and cycle the action, and we could also see on the paper that those were right in next to each other. So this is something we definitely need to get back to and explore again. So here was our target with the 340 grain. We can see our first shot was probably 10 minutes after this group, so the bore was able to cool down. I wouldn't say cold bore, but first shot with this group at 34 grains, and it's way high, so I was like, oh gosh, here we go. But we had 3 of them grouped in right here, and I think this is actually my second shot, where these 2 were much lower in velocity than these 3. So we can see as we reached our upper end, it really started to close in, and that's a 3 grain window there, and they're all kind of touching, which is pretty cool. So that gives me hope as far as finding something that'll function and be accurate without being near the top end if we don't have to be. So over here we have our charges of the 1680 with the 340 grain bullet. These were the first 2, 34, 35, and then 36, 37, 38, where they really starting to tighten up. We still really don't have any pressure signs. Our primers are still rounded. No ejector marks on our case heads. And again, awesome function, and we were still a little bit under our maximum charge, so maybe we'll continue to work up and find a little accuracy node we can hang out in. So our last bullet, very similar design to this one, except it goes about that much further down into the case. Yeah, 412 grains with my alloy, a 457 405. We tried with CFE Black 2 charges just to test function, and then we checked accurate 1680 2 charges just for functioning. And we were able to see here with CFE Black 34.5 grains fully functioned, and we actually had a higher velocity than our higher charge weight. So when we bumped up a half grain, we dipped about 50 feet per second in velocity, but I did feel an increased recoil. No pressure signs, and again, fully functioned for both charges. We do have about a grain or 2 further that we can go as far as the load data I was able to examine. So this isn't a maximum charge. We can move up, we can move down as long as we're still functioning. So maybe there is hope with the CFE Black, but I was pretty surprised and happy with the 1680 loads. Both of them fully functioned, and they kick really freaking good, brother. Holy crap. Pretty much a 12 gauge slug load. 1600 feet per second with 412 grains. That's a considerable load there. And again, both charges at 34.5 and 35 function flawlessly, so that was super cool. And note the close velocity numbers between a half grain of charges, so that's pretty cool. And again, we can work up to almost 37 grains based on Gordon reloading tool. So I'll probably play around in this range, maybe see how high we can actually go before we get any pressure, but it already kicks like a dang mule, so I just need to find an accuracy node, and I think we'll be good there. And real quick, here's our brass for the CFE Black. These top 2, same rounded primer we've seen all day, and then the bottom 2 in the middle is our 1680 charges, same rounded primers, no pressure signs here on the Bushmaster. So our first 2 charges of CFE Black, here was our first shot, 1624, and then the other one was probably this far off the page at 1579. So not so hot there, but with 1680, we're just slightly shifted right of our point of aim, which is pretty cool. And velocities were very close, and those are 2 touching right there with 2 different charge weights of powder as well. So that's pretty cool. As far as this bullet goes, I'm probably going to continue with the 1680, but we did get function with the CFE Black, so maybe I'll play around with that. We can jump up and powder some more if we need to. So again, we can play with both of these, but right now the 1680 is looking more promising. And well, anyways, that's going to do it for today, folks. Plenty of good data we collected, and we're functioning now, so that's also good news. Yippee! But anyways, if you guys enjoy this sort of content, be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you're not already. You can also support us over on patreon.com/dummyround. Thanks for hanging out, and we will see you in the next video. Have a good one!